So many meanings about the scenes. I'm actually breaking down many of them to help us understand the deeper symbolism and knowledge. Time and attention is required. So, what is an allegory? An allegory is a story, poem, or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a moral or political one. Forget everything you think you know. This is the awesome quote by Baron Mordo. Doctor Strange is about a left-brained, egotistical person who gets in a horrific accident, thus sending him on a journey to find a cure after a large amount of suffering. Taking this movie literal will only give us entertainment value. But if we see the forest for the trees or see the hidden or bigger picture, then we gain a moral message about ourselves as well as other aspects. As a prerequisite, I'm going to go over some important information that I believe needs to be understood, at least on a basic level, to help us comprehend where consciousness travels throughout this movie. Here we have both hemispheres of the brain, right and left brain. And what is it that we want to find in between the two? Balance. So some of the antithetical components I feel necessary to bring together are intellect, the generative principle, science, fiction, masterthink, slavethink, dismissive, and naive behavior. So what are the balances between these components? Understanding, free think. Between science and fiction, we have the allegory. And between intellect and the generative principle, we have intelligence. And this is all about finding the balance. Now, just to be clear on the behaviors of the brain, we have the masculine master think. The chronic left brain dominates and creates suppression of the emotion and eventually roots us in the reptile brain or ego. And this is really, really important to keep this in mind for the character Doctor Strange. And then we have the feminine slave think. The chronic right brain dominance creates suppression of survival instinct and eventually roots us in the mammalian brain. And then we have free think, of course. And when both hemispheres are balanced, the neocortex acts in its proper role as the executive command center of the human brain, and intelligence is born. And so it's very important to keep in mind the colors that you see here, because the colors are definitely very prominent in this movie. And just real quick, going over what the main characters are and their meanings symbolically. We have Caecilius, and he's basically the Satanist, religious, right-brained. He's also a little bit left-brained too, because he is the psychopath. He's the false prophet, brings in the fear. And then we have Doctor Strange, who is the hero, of course, and he has the will, the drive. He starts out left brain, of course, and then he's also skeptical and egotistical, has a lot of courage. He definitely takes a lot of action. And then we have Mordo, who's the strength, the heart, left brain, magician, karmic justice, very rigid behavior. And then, of course, the Ancient One, whose thoughts, intelligence, balance, knowledge, wisdom, and she is the elder. She's also the generative principle. In the room of books, masters only, Caecilius and the zealots perform a ritual where he cuts the librarian's head off, which can symbolize a couple of things. One, it means dismembering the head of knowledge from its body or origins. And two, it means stealing a master's brain, literally. He then takes a few pages from the sacred book about manipulating time, which causes a big gap in the mysteries. It symbolizes that Caecilius only has a piece of the bigger picture that has a dangerous potential to stagnate human conscious growth. It's about changing the past to have power over the future, and it's the ego saying, only I should have this power. So we have the neurosurgeon, Dr. Strange is doing surgery while Billy, is the guy on the right, is playing the song Feels So Good. Now I know this is just a little scene, but little scenes are very important to pay close attention to, especially in this kind of movie. Strange confidently names the song and the year, and the female nurse asks Strange, where do you store all this useless information? So this is telling us that when in left-brain imbalanced modality, we know more about trivialities than reality itself. That's part of the left brain. On his way to give a speech, Strange gets in a car crash which symbolically sends him down the holy mountain of consciousness to nadir, the lowest point, or opposite of zenith. He tries to fix his physical problems with material money, and when that doesn't work, he is forced to start looking inward to the spiritual self. Of course, he's not conscious of his spiritual self, but it can happen naturally through suffering. It's almost like, we have to suffer to start our inward journey, to find help or a cure. It's almost like to that of the flu. The flu is like snakeskin. We have to go through a natural stage of suffering to shed off build-up toxins. The flu is analogous to suffering as we go through dark stages to find betterment and clarity. Interestingly enough, we tend to have deep, wild, trippy dreams when down with the flu. I know a lot of people have that. Anyway, it's kind of analogous to the rest of the story. Jonathan Pangborn is a basketball player who was completely paralyzed and magically healed with Dr. Strange which Dr. Strange then wanted to figure out that same regimen to have his hands back. Pangborn felt the only thing was to raise his consciousness. Symbolically, he said strangers took him to the mountaintops where he found his teacher and his mind was elevated. His spirit deepened, and he chose to settle for his miracle and come back home, kind of like a tent picture. Keep this in mind for the end of the movie too. He tells Dr. Strange of the place Kamataj, which in reality that's Kathmandu, Nepal, where the Ancient One resides, and Pangborn's character in reality would be known as a sorcerer occultist, as he is keeping all the knowledge and wisdom for his own gain. So basically not helping end slavery. So this is the part where Strange basically starts his journey, and he goes east to Kamataj. As soon as he arrives, the sun is rising, symbolically the beginning of his journey. In this movie, the journey from west to east geographically symbolizes going from left brain to right brain. Because Strange is the hero of the story, it's important to understand hero equals spiritual purpose, which is also getting back to the source. It's part of the generative principle, journey from darkness to light. And keep in mind, the good side of his ego led him on his path to find a cure. When Strange arrives to Kamataj, he is immediately jumped for his watch, which gets shattered. And Strange looks at it and says, "That's all I have left." So he obviously has an attachment to it. What's really happening here is his 5-sense illusion of man-made time becomes shattered. This is showing that he's about to transition from the material mindset to the higher self. Of course, it's also sentimental because it's a gift from Christine, the nurse. Five sense illusion means the belief that there is nothing beyond that which we can touch, taste, smell, hear, and see. He has an attachment to man-made time as seen in the beginning with his watch collection. So this is part of the left brain imbalance. After saving Strange from being killed for his watch, Mordo brings him to the Ancient One. But before entering the temple, he says, forget everything you think you know. In other words, let go of your beliefs and make room for an open mind. This includes getting rid of all those junk trivialities we all know. Dr. Strange finally meets the Ancient One with the question of how she helped Pangborn walk again, as it seemingly was impossible with Western medicine. She lets him know that the body could be put back together in all sorts of ways. She asks him, how did you reattach 7 nerves and put the human spine back together, bone by bone? He says, study and practice, years of it. So in other words, study and practice is time and attention. This is telling us we can't understand these mysteries without lots of time and attention, as well as being open-minded, staying humble with ourselves. She lets him know how to reorient the spirit to heal the body, which of course Dr. Strange is being very left-brained and can't comprehend what she's really saying. She shows him the maps of the body, such as the MRI scan, chakra nervous system, and then lets him know they are only half of the equation. Each of those maps were made by someone who could only see in part, but not the whole. And of course, Dr. Strange has mostly the scientific Western medicine side of the equation, the left brain side. This is cellular biologist Brewce Lipton, who studies and talks about proteins, epigenetics, the field, the signal, and many other important body functions and energies. He brings lots of scientific light to the last slide I just covered, and I highly recommend watching his presentation, great keynote on Mind Over Matter on YouTube. That guy's awesome. So it's important to know and understand the Vedic chakra system, but not without knowing how it correlates with color frequency of the visible spectrum. Understanding the Hermetic principle of vibration is key in understanding these Eastern medicine maps. We can also see how it's expressed in various ways throughout the movie. So Strange becomes very dismissive and just can't comprehend how he can be healed through belief because he still hasn't let go of everything he thinks he knows. She hits him in the astro dimension, symbolic of left brain driving into the right brain. Then she symbolically strikes him in his third eye, which forces him into the psilocybin-esque trip that completely transcends him from the material self, as clearly seen in that scene, in that clip. During this trip, there's this part where he briefly sees a monarch butterfly and reaches for it with his hand, symbolically showing not only his hands represent the cocoon of his caterpillar self, but it's also a moment of metamorphosis or transition he's having from the lower material self. Strange is being pulled down by hands within his mind, symbolizing what's holding him back spiritually. The Ancient One explains how thoughts shape reality, then says, at the root of existence, mind and matter meet. This is about polarities. The multiverse is simply different dimensions or perceptions within the universe. Of course, this is a movie, and it's important not to confuse the two. All is one, and of course, there isn't any separation. So then after the skeptical, arrogant behavior of Dr. Strange, the Ancient One is trying to figure out if she should go on with putting time into him because she doesn't want to lose him to the dark side like Caecilius. Mordo says, "You didn't lose me. I wanted the power to defeat my enemies. You gave me the power to defeat my demons and to live within the natural law. Ancient One says, we never lose our demons, Mordo. We only learn to live above them. What is being said here is that our lower ego self never goes away, as it is part of who we are. Being present and aware of our ego is living above it. The spiritual self over the material self. Time will tell you how much I love you. On this side of the watch, we see a positive message from the sacred feminine, Christine, which is about real time, and the other side of the watch is the man-made time, which was crushed. Like I said earlier, it's about time and attention, which is an aspect of true love and care. Mordo gives Strange the password for the Wi-Fi, which is Shambhala. Wi-Fi meaning internal connection, and Shambhala representing the heart chakra. So the password means connecting to the heart chakra, spiritually and internally. And to put it more simply, it means connection to nature. Initiation or being initiated means to begin something or being introduced to something sacred. So Strange is starting to learn the mysteries. In the room of books for masters only, each book is in a hexagon shape and symbolic of the honeycomb within a beehive, which is very sacred in Freemasonry. The archetypal significance of the beehive symbolizes the great work and wisdom of the masons or the builders. Honey is the gold, the light transmuted from pollen or base metals. The beehive symbolizes the brain or the library. In this scene, Dr. Strange is reading the book by Cagliostro, The Study of Time, which is the same book Caecilius stole the ritual pages from. It's always interesting to point out and research what the characters are reading, as it may reveal much more about the movie plot as well as ourselves. Count Alessandro di Cagliostro in the 1700s was the alias of the occultist, Giuseppe Balsamo. Cagliostro was a self-styled magician who studied occult arts, including psychic healing, alchemy, and scrying. Of course, we all know occult means hidden. Scrying is the practice of looking into a suitable medium in the hope of detecting significant messages or visions. The objective might be personal guidance, prophecy, revelation, or inspiration. But down the ages, scrying in various forms also has been a prominent means of divination or fortune telling. Interestingly enough, Cagliostro was actually sentenced to death on the charge of being a Freemason back then. Caecilius does a ritual that draws power from the dark dimension in the church, which is very symbolic of using religion to bring in dark forces. Dr. Strange starts to learn about how to use the sling ring, which is suggestive of spiritual armor. Spiritual armor being the knowledge of the mysteries or esotericism, which can help protect us from those who use and abuse that knowledge. So use it for their own gain. The Ancient One says you cannot beat a river into submission. You have to surrender to it, to its current, and use its power as your own. Dr. Strange's intellect gets in the way, which he has to get past in order to go inward and understand what that means. It's interesting because she tells him to silence his ego and his power will rise, but it is his instinctive ego that saves him. So this is about learning how to transcend material beliefs. Master Hamir, who has one hand, proves to Strange that it's not all about the material. It's about using imagination, the component of the right brain, to see that nothing can hold us back except our narrow-mindedness. The Ancient One takes Strange to a high side of Mount Everest, which represents the self. The mountain represents the self. And how we have to be individually responsible while having the uppercase will to go inward and do the great work. It's about building up the courage because we have a hard time understanding the abstract of natural law, especially if we're in a left-brained imbalance. This is why he goes inward, in an inward direction in the mountain. It's very easy to just die when we are cold, tired, and too skeptical. He goes from freezing temperatures to the warmth which he melts. So going from, below 32 degrees to above 32, which is to 33 degrees. And that's definitely some Freemasonry symbology there, I'd say. This part is suggestive of Strange finding care. He submitted and went inward. He faced and accepted the truth. In this scene, Wong, the librarian, has headphones on while listening to a mainstream artist's song suggested by Strange, which allows him to take the knowledge from Wong without him noticing. This is very symbolic of the real-life distractions that keep us from the information and make the information fall from us. So I thought that was pretty neat how they demonstrated that. And you have the mirror dimension, present, ever present, but undetected, like an occult society. Dr. Strange tries tampering with a ritual using the eye of Agimoto, also known as the emerald stone, symbolic of green chakra, which manipulates time, symbolically past, present, and future, or birth, growth, decay. So within the Marvel Universe, the green stone is one of the 6 singularities, or what's known as the Infinity Stones. I'm not going to get into too much of what that means, or the deep significance, but the colors definitely are very important. I want to say a little bit about sorcery and magic. Now, it would appear that they are romanticizing sorcery in this story, and maybe that's true. But because they use the name Supreme, meaning above, and because it's a name given to the Ancient One who possesses the highest wisdom, then it might actually make logical sense. I'm going to try to help us understand that now. Just remember that magic is a mysterious force used for good, used to uplift and change the world for the better. Magic is the science and art of influencing change in accordance with the higher self will. Sorcery is like magic, but dark, and bending the laws of nature in selfish manners to externally control for the benefit of one's ego self, lowercase will, which may cause or allow suffering to rise or stagnate in those who are affected by their actions. The Ancient One draws power from the dark dimension with her sorcery skills to live longer, which is obviously part of the ego, the survival mode. She's obviously the most balanced and wise being in the whole story, thus is more important to see that it's her understanding of both magic and sorcery and what she does with them that defines her as good or evil. Obviously, she's good, and so is Strange, who apparently becomes the Sorcerer Supreme later. I don't know what happens after that, but I'm talking about this particular movie. Just an example of real magic, me giving this presentation and helping you connect the dots in your mind, that's magic. That's because I'm doing what I'm doing up here to bring light into the world through will. Uppercase will. Master Wong describes the 3 sanctums. A sanctum is a sanctuary, of course. If we go deep enough into our studies, we'll find the significance of the sanctum placement and how they correspond to our brain, as well as corresponding to the earth as a brain. New York, London, and Hong Kong are where we see 3 sanctums. If we orient ourselves geographically, New York would be the left brain, London would be the midbrain, Hong Kong would be suggestive of the right brain, which is also the east, the sacred feminine, and the submissive side. That's the aspect of the right brain. As we see Dormammu's dark dimension entering in at the end of the movie. So he's entering, that's, going, it's penetrating into the sacred feminine, right? The right brain. I thought this was a really cool expression here. The cloak of levitation cape is literally fight or flight. It fights and it flies. It's red, which is associated with the reptile brain and root chakra. It's also part of Doctor Strange's ego that's good and wants to live. The cape connects at the nape of the neck, which is where the reptilian brain is located. If you look closely, the inside of the cape has a checkerboard pattern, which is base, red, root. I'll get more into that soon. There's definitely some natural law happening here, as Strange saved a man early in the movie by removing a bullet from the medulla part of the brain. The medulla is part of the reptile brain, the base brain. So it makes sense why the cape or the cloak picked and saved him. Kundalini. In this scene, we symbolically see the rising of the Kundalini. This is the stage of rising from the sleeping body or root to the spiritual enlightenment, a transition into higher consciousness or mystical illumination. Also, the symbolic metamorphosis of the butterfly. In this scene, Caecilius gets in Strange's head to confuse him about the intentions of the Ancient One. Of course, he is very rebellious against her, but what that means is we can get so deep in our work and still be misguided, especially if we start believing others' authority or lose sight of our moral compass and understanding. The deception is believing that a world beyond time and death is what's best for Earth. Being sidetracked by Caecilius' deception, Strange metaphorically falls off the path by not being prepared and wearing his sling ring, meaning his spiritual armor or his guard is down. Once again, Strange has a fall in consciousness and nearly stays asleep for good. Christine, the sacred feminine, is reviving the spirit using the physical world. We can be very overwhelmed and traumatized by the esoteric world to the point of going back to sleep, and it is the sacred feminine that heals us, wakes us back up, or helps us back onto the path. So the astro battle is about the self making the transition from the coma sleeping body or casket to rising up above the floor, which is base consciousness. It's about leaving the coma state or dead self behind. Sometimes it takes a good fight with our shadow self to find that care to wake up. This is a unique little scene that I feel gets across so much of the truth in our journeys, because when we understand some deep esoteric knowledge, we get mocked and ridiculed the moment we utter anything of it. And if you guys are familiar with that scene, you'll know what I'm talking about. It is our will to walk through that door to the unseen. It is our will and courage to see what's on the other side of that door, to get rid of that narrow-mindedness. So this is very symbolic of Strange going inward into the mountain, just on a more of a easier way to see that. What we might see can be very scary, because truth is scary. This is why most people don't want to look into it. Why most people don't want to look into the self. So truth is stranger than fiction, obviously. It's interesting that the bad guy lies dead under the cloak of levitation. In the first degree tracing board of Solomon's temple, there is usually a casket under the checkerboard floor, indicating the dead as well as those who are in their sleeping material body. Also, the red or the root red chakra is known as the base. And we all know base frequency is low. I don't have a low frequency. There you go. There's a little bit of low. The cloak is, maybe that wasn't that low. I don't know. The cloak is all of that. Here's a nice little Easter egg in case you missed it. That's Stan Lee reading and laughing in a skeptical way at the book Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley. It's a great book, and I read, just the Doors of Perception part of it, not the second part. But it can help us understand a few parts of the movie, especially the unseen realm. This is also the mirror dimension. All right, so now we're getting into some of the exciting stuff, if that other stuff wasn't. Synchromysticism. For anyone who doesn't know what the word means, it's very important to understand. It is a combination of the meanings of synchronicity and mysticism, a coincidence with meaning that can only be understood by the conscious observance and seeing the deeper connections and correlations between things like lyrics, movies, media coverage, symbols, and esoteric knowledge, etc. Remember, this is the part of the movie where we see the Ancient One who represents balance and unity as she is being ritualistically murdered. She represents the One. She represents the balanced brain. As we see here, this Synchrony Bank building represents a one which is being divided into two and falling. And simultaneously, the Ancient One is being divided from the flower of life and falls to her death, which I'm going to get into. It's also symbolic of our brain unified only to be divided and fall in consciousness. Keep in mind, this is the time they are all in New York, within the mirror dimension, the undetected realm. Anybody remember what happened in New York 2001? By the way, this Synchrony Bank, and synchrony equals synchronous, meaning existing or occurring at the same time, which brings more validation to what I just covered and what I'm about to cover. I don't really know tarot too well, but this is the Tower card from the Weight deck, which is very synchromistic with this scene. You could say the Ancient One represents the crown, which is struck and knocked off the tower or pillar of consciousness. And the two that fall as a result are mortal and strange, in opposition or apart into duality. There's even this person with the red cape on the left falling, and so we also have the One World Trade Center and the two of them falling right there. So it's very synchromistic. Caecilius and the Ancient One meet on the Flower of Life, which also represents an altar. Caecilius basically makes an offering to Dormammu by killing the Ancient One, allowing chaos and fear to come into the world. She is then disconnected from the Flower of Life in the ritual as she fell to her seeming death. The people at the ground see the fall and smack of the Ancient One when she is forced out of the mirror dimension. Hence, the people only witness the Ancient One's fall to the ground, but having no idea what or why had happened prior to that. So because they are showing people witnessing her plummet in death, it shows us that this is a public sacrifice. She's knocked down from the top, the spiritual plane, what most can't see, down to her material death, what most of us can see. A few more things I'd like to add. The Flower of Life symbolizes the information of all life as well as the connection to all beings. So in this dimension, we see that we are always getting cut off and divided from ourselves, our origins. The Ancient One being killed on the Flower of Life by the egotistical religious Dormammu believer Caecilius is a dark ritual that I would say symbolizes cutting us off from our origins by our ego, which sends us free-falling to our collective death. Here we've seen yet another fall, and in the public at that. The Ancient One's spirit then rises into the astral plane, consciously joined by Strange right after her death. She explains the moment and what she sees in him and his potential. She then says, arrogance and fear still keep you from learning the simplest and most significant lesson of all. He asks, which is? It's not about you. This is the very reason why so many of us are failing to see reality and the true connection to the universe. It's because too many of us have this me mentality. What's in it for me? What do I get out of this? Why do things only happen to me? It's not about you or me. It's about us and all life. It's about reconnecting ourselves to nature and doing what's right out of our understanding of consciousness, and definitively knowing the difference between right and wrong. We are on this journey, just like Strange, not only to heal ourselves, but to help others heal as well. If we only do it for ourselves, then we end up like Caecilius and the Zealots, or Pangborn, the basketball player. We end up on the wrong side when we make everything about our individual selves. Strange creates a time spell which gives him the chance to save Hong Kong and the world from Dormammu. He then flies into the essence of Dormammu and faces him to destroy and bargain a deal. Dormammu then repeatedly kills Strange over and over in a time loop, which then finally he realizes he doesn't want to be Strange's prisoner anymore. Strange rises and faces the shadow self to turn things around. So you could say Dormammu is an overly inflated ego head of Doctor Strange. Symbolically, Strange faced him and overcame his demons, thus breaking the loop. And there's kind of a live, die, repeat reference there with Tom Cruise, which was pretty awesome. I highly recommend that movie too. Repeating life over and over until we get the lesson. Interestingly enough, Benedict Cumberbatch plays both characters. I'm not going to postulate what the deep meaning of this is, but it's pretty strange. So Caecilius and the Zealots are wiped away from earth, symbolizing that Strange is the Savior and came to cleanse everyone of their sins, or in other words, save everyone from the darkness of our ego. That's the Zealots flying away to Neverland. Ow. The bill always comes due, always. In other words, natural law works perfectly, and there will be consequences for our actions taken, even if it was based in good intentions. It doesn't matter if you were manipulating the laws of nature for good intentions, you still have to pay the price. So I'm just going to briefly cover this. Norse mythology is the body of mythology of the North Germanic people stemming from the Norse paganism and continuing after the Christianization of Scandinavia and into the Scandinavian folklore of the modern period. And also remember, Loki equals chaos. Asgard represents the higher self, and Ragnarok is a major event that wipes out Asgard. Very, very important to understand about the self. I'm still studying that, the Norse mythology. Okay, so that last scene is also an extra scene at the end of the movie, in case you guys missed that. And then this is the very, very last scene after the credits. The true purpose of a sorcerer is to twist things out of their proper shape, stealing power, perverting nature, like you. And that was what Mordo said to Pangborn. Of course, Pangborn thinks the power he possesses is his, and Mordo takes it back as debt to the natural order. He never did anything good with his magic, only selfishly used it for his own gain, like a sorcerer would. Talking with like-minded people about allegories in movies or books is a great way to not only raise consciousness and become symbol strengthened, but it's also stimulating and encouraging to go do more deep esoteric homework to try and figure out what we're missing in the mysteries and why it matters. Of course, none of this means anything unless it helps us find our true care. Thank you all very much.
So he paid the price at the end. It showed his hands were shaking again. Right?
Yeah.
Now it's time to watch it again.
Awesome, Nathan. That's freaking mind-blowing.
Thanks.
I'm glad you explained the color green because that was killing me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was drunk, but I still was asking.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, it'd take me, pretty much like a half a day to explain all the other symbolism in that. But, it's all, it's hard enough because it's there, you don't want to get caught up in the trivialities. You just want to take away what's important from the important message from the story. So.